So, first of all, there's the single-celled animals, we'll say. Well, we don't have to talk about them. What we're going to start to talk about is animals that have a sufficiently complex nervous system to have to respond to the social environment, which would be made out of conspecifics often. So lobsters are a perfectly good place to start. It's like there's a lobster and then there's another lobster, and maybe they're alone. Well, then they only have to solve the problem of being one lobster. But then as soon as you put them together, they have to solve the problem of being two lobsters in the same space. And then maybe there's 100 lobsters in the same space. So then the question becomes, how do you organize lobster behavior when most of the environment consists of other lobsters behaving? And the answer to that is you make a dominance hierarchy. And then the dominance hierarchy, the way you adapt to the dominance hierarchy is by noting the patterns of behavior that compose it, and by first internalizing those, let's say, modeling them to the degree that that's possible, but even more remarkably, over huge expanses of time, because the dominance hierarchy and its patterns are a fundamental element of reality, you start to adapt biologically to the dominance hierarchy. So, okay, so now what we've got is we've got an emergent set of social behaviors. Okay, they're not rules, because they're not rules till you observe them, or till you codify them, or till you articulate them. What they are is the patterns from which rules emerge, and they're deep patterns. So then you might say, okay, what are the rules for staying alive in a dominance hierarchy, not being torn apart by your conspecifics? And that's learning quickly who can tear you into pieces and who can't, and learning how to get away from the thing that can tear you into pieces quickly, and learning how to push the thing that can't aside. And you better learn that fast. And you want to learn it with the minimum possible amount of damage, because that's another problem that social creatures have, or at least creatures that are in a dominance hierarchy. It gets even more complicated when the members of the dominance hierarchy start to cooperate. But lobsters, as far as I know, don't cooperate. So, but still, like, their behavior is very, very determined by the nature of the dominance hierarchy. Okay, so what that is, the patterns that govern a dominance hierarchy are the place from which ethics derive. Right, and they evolved. And they're not arbitrary. That's the other thing. What works in one dominance hierarchy works in another. And so you might say, well, what's your proof for that? And I would say, well, one of my proofs for that is that we use the same brain chemical and the same neurological system, roughly speaking, to keep track of our position in the dominance hierarchy as lobsters do. And that's 300 million years of continuity. So that's real enough as far as I'm concerned. So, okay, so now you've got your lobsters, and fine, they organize themselves according to these rules, and the top lobster is confident and makes himself big, and he's the one that gets all the chicks. So your success in the dominance hierarchy, especially if you're male, also determines the probability of your reproduction, and it may determine that more than anything else. So how to maneuver in the dominance hierarchy might be the prime question that faces creatures that have to live with conspecifics. And the females, in some sense, use the dominance hierarchy as a distributed computational device to determine the worth of the males. So, because what the females do is they sort of hang off to the side, and they watch the males battle it out, and then they just pick from the top. Now, they have their own hierarchy. And, you know, it runs by somewhat different rules, but it's very smart. They're externalizing the cognitive problem to the structure itself.